In 1944, Chicago research physician, educator, musician, and poet Dr. Edith Farnsworth took a Sunday drive along the Fox River with a friend, stopping to admire a beautiful meadow surrounded by large old trees. In the background stood an open-frame iron bridge. Later in life, she wrote, "We walked down to the riverbank where we found the most delightful easy chairs in between the swelling roots of two immense black sugar maples, whose shade was repeated and extended by the hackberries and lindens and the walnut trees grouped about us. In the water, close to the shore, a milk-white heron stood, motionless, at the foot of his rippling image. This was the first visit, which was to offer me its moods and reflections, and its beauty and depredations for some 26 years. The parcel of land would soon become the site of a renowned modern country house, the critically acclaimed Farnsworth House, a masterpiece of modernist architecture designed by Mies van der Rohe.
It really is a fascinating story that every textbook, every modern architecture book in the world calls it the Farnsworth House, but no one talks about Edith Farnsworth. And that's both remarkable and unsurprising and easy to fix. Edith was a research physician. She was also a translator of Italian poetry. She spoke Italian fluently. She was engaged with the world in so many ways. So she was such a multifaceted woman in a way that really, I think, breaks with conventions and broke with sort of the dogma of what you expected a woman in the 40s to be. So, of course, she was also the patron who commissioned the Farnsworth House by Mies van der Rohe, a house that itself broke with dogma and broke with convention in a way that changed the world.
Edith Farnsworth was born in 1903 to a wealthy Chicago family who made their fortune during the mid-1800s. Her parents and grandparents lived on Chicago's Gold Coast, among other prominent Chicagoans, but moved to Chicago's fashionable North Shore before Edith's teenage years.
She was my mother's younger sister. They shared a room. They quarreled.
It was there in the woods and ravines near Winnetka that young Edith took walks with her father, learning to appreciate the trees, birds, and wildflowers. A bright student, Edith attended private boarding schools on the East Coast, spending summers at her family's country house in Maine, where she surrounded herself with friends, nature, books, and music, interests that continued throughout her life.
We know that while she would spend her summers as a young girl in Castine, Maine, she would volunteer to help out a local doctor there. I think she knew what she was capable of, and I think she was bright enough to pursue whatever she wanted.
After high school, she attended the University of Chicago, majoring in zoology and English literature, while also continuing violin instruction at the American Academy of Music in Chicago's Fine Arts Building. While still just 19, she convinced her parents to let her move to Rome.
She moves to Rome to study at the Conservatorio di Musica under Mario Corti, who teaches violin. But that also becomes a gateway to her becoming friends with the Italian poet Umberto Barbaro, who introduces her to a group of young intellectuals, anti-fascists, and to a bunch of poets that she had never read before, modern Italian poets who end up being the sort of poets that she ends up translating later in life.
When she came back to Chicago after being in Italy, she had met another physician who had told her that her interest should be in research. She was a very practical person in that sense. When she realized that her career as a concert violinist wasn't going to happen, I think she looked at the next thing that she thought she could do. She attended Northwestern University Medical School from 1934 to 1938, and she got her doctor's degree then. And from there, she decided to pursue her internship and residency training at Passavant Memorial Hospital, which was right across the street. She was credited as being the first doctor to use ACTH in the treatment of nephrotic syndrome, which is basically kidney disease. In 1942, right around the time that Edith became a member of the attending staff at Passavant, the 12th General Hospital was called into active duty. So in addition to doing her research, she also had a lot of private patients. She also served on various medical staff committees. She also had an associate professorship at the medical school. And she also did volunteer work. And it probably meant that as hard as she worked at the hospital, she needed a place where she could certainly decompress.
So, in 1945, she commissioned the office of Mies van der Rohe to design a country house for her recently purchased property along the Fox River near Plano.
They met at a party, and somehow in conversation, she revealed that she was thinking of getting out of the city and having a place to retreat to on the weekend. She didn't choose the aesthetic. Mies chose the aesthetic. He pretty much told her that this is what she was going to have as her weekend cottage.
Edith enjoyed picnic lunches with Mies and the boys from the office as they discussed Mies's concept for a glass pavilion raised above the river's intermittent floods. The design process extended over 4 years, in part because Dr. Farnsworth played an active role in the home's design.
She really thought of this as her project because it was something that she was paying for, something she had found the land for, and something she'd imagined being possible in her life.
In 1947, the house was featured in an exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, a career retrospective of Mies van der Rohe's pioneering modern architecture. Edith attended the exhibition along with Mies's staff, friends, and colleagues, including Frank Lloyd Wright, who called it Much Ado About Almost Nothing. As the house took shape from 1949 to 1951, Edith began planting a garden, buying furniture, and hosting friends and family at her new country house.
And it just amazes me, somebody that was as positive and talented and professional as she was could be led along. I think gradually she began to see details that were impractical. Only 2 windows, no walls if she had a guest. At some point she began to get pretty disenchanted with this.
Architectural Forum's 1951 feature article described Dr. Farnsworth as a temporary tenant and implied she did not understand Mies's architecture. While Mies and the architectural press celebrated the first American house by the renowned architect Mies van der Rohe, Edith and the consumer press characterized the home as sterile and unlivable.
So most people who are familiar with the Farnsworth house understand that there was a lawsuit, but they don't know that Mies actually initiated the lawsuit, that Dr. Farnsworth countersued, or that the stakes of the lawsuit were the actual property itself. But I do think that it was to her credit deciding that she was going to take ownership of this at a time when most women would not have had the resources or the sort of fearlessness to go after somebody who they felt had wronged them. I think because of that, historians have felt comfortable constructing a really unflattering narrative about Dr. Farnsworth that we're still unpacking to this day.
I remember her announcing to my mother, "My house is a monument to Mies van der Rohe, and I'm paying for it." And she was really disappointed and furious.
While Mies wanted to furnish the house with his furniture designs, Edith chose furnishings from some of the leading modern designers of the day, including Florence Knoll, Jens Rissum, Bruno Matheson, Hans Wegner, and Franco Albini. During the later 1950s, Edith collected Chinese antiquities, including a pair of 17th century stone lions to stand guard on the lower terrace. Her country house was becoming her own. During the 1960s, as Edith Farnsworth moved towards retirement, she spent more time at her country house, and the house took on a more casual, eclectic feel. In 1967, she received a condemnation letter stating that Kendall County and the state of Illinois would take more than a quarter of her land to construct a new highway bridge and levee just west of her house. Dr. Farnsworth and her neighbors sued to halt construction, but lost, prompting her to sell her famous house and retire to Italy.
I think that having sold the Farnsworth house and buying a villa, which was the exact opposite of the house, it was 15th century stone. You know, it came with acres of olives and vines. The last 10 years of her life between 1969 and 1978, she really gets to focus on poetry and Italian culture and literature, something that I think she was inspired to do by her time there in the 1920s.
Edith Farnsworth died in December of 1977 and is buried in Chicago's Graceland Cemetery, ironically not far from Mies van der Rohe, who died in 1969.
It really is about how Edith Farnsworth loved this house and in some ways hated this house, and how she lived in this house most of all. Historic sites can continue to change, and just like places change and evolve, the stories that we tell at historic sites can and should change and evolve over time. And I think that's a really important dimension to the Farnsworth house that we need to consider and to reconsider.